Okay, so we can start, and I'm proud to present our last guest, because Martin is the last to speak to this workshop. And by the way, Martin is the first non-strictly art historian to speak, even though he studied also art history. But Martin is also studied also philosophy and religious studies, I would say. And so therefore we will have this supra regional and supra confessional possibility to see something else, because I asked Martin to speak about travel to Holy Land, since the thematic for workshop is really linked to it, traveling to Holy Land with Michael, but in a much more recent time, and from a person who would not exactly expect to travel to the Holy Land, at least from our, let's say, Westernocentric point of view, since the Rabbi Nachman from Bratzlaw was traveling not to see the Christian Holy Land, but the Jewish one. So therefore it's an opening to the traveling in a bit different sense. And while Martin is working currently in Berlin in the Zentrum für Literatur und Kulturforschung, I hope I said it rightly.
Perfect.
Perfect, and he's specialist of several different things. He's working on one hand about the Jewish culture after the 18th century, let's say, but also about the dialogue between antiquity and modern times. And he had many important places where he taught. He's now, since 2014, I think you are teaching in Innsbruck each second semester, but he also taught in Harvard. So
Stanford,
but it's with Harvard.
Yeah, well, other side of the continent.
Stanford, so that's my understanding. And I invited him especially because he's one of the, let's say, last intellectual humanities I know, walking around this world, because as you already had the occasion to experience, he's able to speak about many things, asking not only about the question, but also about the way, why are you asking this question, and sometimes also going to ask you, why do you think you would like to ask the question this way? So this, let's say, superposition of critical thinking, which is on the very heart of the human science, this capacity to come out from yourself, to come out from your body, even though we are trying to do it some way, sometimes with the body, and to understand what are you doing, what you are doing. And also this, say, traditional way of doing humanities, having 3 or 4 different, let's say, really ideas and questions into your studies. And it's also something which is lost. We are mainly of us art historians and nothing else, which is great. We are very good in terms of precise work, almost engineering in terms of what we know about our subject of studies, but we are losing this universalist culture which was the very heart of human sciences. So for all those reasons I invited Martin, and I'm looking forward to travel in dreams and in reality with Rabbi Nachman from Bratzlaw.
Okay, thank you so much, Ivan, for the very kind invitation, and I'm really glad to be here. I mean, perhaps you have noticed that I'm feeling very, very well here with you. You're a fantastic group. It's actually one of the best places I've ever been. I do not say this because I want to be nice or kind. It's the truth. It's really something special for me to be here. It links several things which I never thought I could link again, but still with you it's possible. I enjoyed every evening and also the day when we were working, but of course also the so to say, when we were celebrating. And I think even you are doing a marvelous job, and you are really the hope of Europe. I mean, the group now. No, it's nice. I mean, it's quite exotic what I'm going to do out of several reasons. First, as I'm pushing you not only, so to say, away from the Middle Ages. You stressed it several times in the, one could say or Reinhard Koselleck, a German historian and historiographer or theoretician, theorist of history, of historiography, called it the subtle side. So saying with the French Revolution, something new, a new era started. Yeah, of course, one could say as a Marxist, the bourgeois society, but still, of course, more than it. This is, of course, true. I would say against Koselleck, this is a very Prussian, Preußischer point of view, because it's also the time when Prussia became one of the, so to say, mighty powers in Europe. And I would say with Abi Warburg that we have, of course, to go back to the Middle Ages, behind the Middle Ages, to antiquity, not because it was better or it's out of romanticism, but because to understand our now as a form of Nachleben, as a form of afterlife, and also of a certain kind of survival. And I think Rabbi Nachman of Bratzlaw is a very good example of it. He is, perhaps you may have heard of him, he's one of the better known figures of Jewish history, outside of Jewish history, as he was also a poet. He didn't write down his tales, but his pupils, his students wrote down his tales, but they were published the first time by, outside Judaism, not in Yiddish, not in Hebrew, by Martin Buber in a German translation and transformation, but of course you can have them also in the original version in translations, English and German, I suppose Czech too. And one could really say he's, I would say, the older brother of a certain František Kafka you may know from your place. It's really between, one could say, Kafka, surrealism, and the Brethren Grimm, what he's doing. And I will not today speak about the tales, but even the tales, of course, are embedded in this whole enterprise of the travel to the Holy Land. Here I have Holy Land. I think it's the only, so to say, slide where I have it. It will then diminish and then will later show up as Eretz Jisrael, which is the, so to say, Hebrew term for the land of Israel. Land of Israel, you have to, in a way, separate from Yisrael or Israel as a people, okay? So it's nothing religious, nothing Zionist, nothing political, it's just a decision to do it. Okay, I have two parts. The first part is, one could say, the world of Rabbi Nachman. I called it Hasidism and Rabbi Nachman's place in it, which maybe it's a little strange. It's longer than the part on the travel as such, but you will soon find out why I decided to do it. And I will start with a very short kind of, not definition, what Judaism is, the structure, so to say, the inner, the skeleton of Judaism, which here comes up as Judaisms, okay? Because Judaism is one single religion, but it has, of course, different, so to say, not sects, of course, no churches, not confessions, but different layers, yeah. So, but if we say what could be the common ground of this different form of Judaism, one, of course, would say that it is the oldest of three Western religions. You will guess easily the other two ones are Christianity and Islam. Yeah? Islam is also a Western religion, as all three of them are rooted into the Hebrew Bible. The Hebrew Bible is not only part of Judaism, as you know, as the Old Testament is part of Christianity, and it is also part of the Islam, as the Quran is a somewhat a palimpsestic structure overwriting the Hebrew Bible. Okay, but this is not so. It doesn't stand in the center, but just to get you rid of some maybe ideas you have about Judaism as such. Its beginnings disappear in the history of, in the darkness of religious history. There is no founding figure as such. Of course, there's Abraham, there's Moses, there are others, okay, King David, but not like in the case of the Islam, where the Prophet Muhammad is, of course, a founding figure. In Buddhism, Siddhartha Gautama, called the Buddha, it's not like in Christianity where we have Jesus called the Christ, who is, I don't think, the founder of Christianity, but of course some starting point. Yeah, this is quite, in a way, important. The starting point as such would be the Bible, and one could say the Judaisms are its commentaries. Okay, so what we now call Judaism would be a series of different commentaries on the Bible. The central role in Judaism is that of the Torah, which is hard. Torah means Sinai, the Torah from Sinai, from Mount Sinai. Torah is very hard to translate. The Apostle Paul and Luther chose to translate it with nomos or Gesetz, which is a misunderstanding, productive in some way, but if you want to understand more of Judaism, you had to get rid of it. It has a double form, a written form and an oral form. And the rabbinic, the rabbis are, so to say, the functionaries, the one who stand at the institutional center of the tradition, of the Jewish tradition, after the destruction of the Second Temple, 70 Christian era, the first war against the Romans. And the rabbinic legend has it that during the 14 days which Moses spent at Mount Sinai in the cloud together with God, God gave him the 2 tablets, as you know. In the Christian understanding, these are the 10 Gebote, but in the Jewish it's the whole Torah. So it's the Pentateuch, okay? The 5 books of Moses is what was written on the 2 tablets. But during, of course, God is a quick writer. He doesn't need 40 days and nights to inscribe 2 tablets. So he also talked to Moses, and this is the oral Torah. And in the rabbinic understanding, all possible interpretation of the Bible, and especially the Pentateuch, the written Torah, was already given to Moses, okay? So this is, of course, a construction, a fabrication, so to say, we know it, but still it's important. So if you're an ordained rabbi and if you're following certain hermeneutic principles, you are somehow together with Moses and God in the cloud at Mount Sinai. So, okay. So, what is also important, following them, that for the rabbis, the Torah is not longer in heaven but on earth, because it was given to Moses, which means that the Torah has not only to be done, but has also to be studied. It's very, very important. Judaism has put the stress very much on studying the Torah, and reflecting on the Torah and thinking what are the meanings of the Torah. So one could say in Judaism there are less or almost no dogmas, but several different orthopraxis, correct doing, following the Torah. Okay. What may also be important, that the published religious activity, I put religious in quotation marks, as religion is not really the best category. One could say Judaism is a form of life. It's not so much, and doesn't so much understand itself as a religion. Well, one could say this understanding is the traditional understanding of religion, that the religion is not a certain department of our life, but is like connected to everything what we are doing, like the salt in the soup, so to say. I mean, one could even say that pilgrimages are kind of travels with religious, so to say, foundation. But you couldn't, from a pilgrimage, you could not even get rid of the aspect that it's also a travel, that you are leaving your home and that you're going to a fancy place, so to say. Okay. But these public religious activities in Judaism are traditionally purely male affairs. That's quite important, okay? I mean, in the reform movements, we have ordained female rabbis and also female mystics, but one could say until recently it was a purely male activity. So there are some religious, so to say, ceremonies which are done by women, but they are not public, they are at home For instance, the first activity of the celebration of the Sabbat on Friday evening, this is done by, so to say, a mistress of the house when she is lighting the candle. So that's her role. Okay. So the first part, Hasidism and Rabbi Nachman's place in it. Hasidism is a reform movement beginning in the midst of the 17th century, a mystical reform, first among the East European Jews of Podolia and Volhynia. We'll show you several maps then, which in a way has its climax from 1750 until, one could say, 1830, then was said by its first, so to say, students, academic students, Martin Buber, Gershom Scholem, and others, that it would then have degenerated, so to say. The last one would be Rabbi Nachman and his pupils. But of course, this is kind of ideology. It's a very strong movement, not only in Israel today, what we would call the Orthodox Jews, mostly of them are members of a Hasidic Chavarut, of a Hasidic group, but also in other places like the US or in Europe. So they are very active, actually. Hasidism is a collective name and meaning certain groups, and each of these groups is characterized that in its center there is a charismatic figure, the so-called tzaddik, which is Hebrew for the just one, der Gerechte, Wunderrebbe in Yiddish. I mean, also today in the lingua franca in these groups is Yiddish, okay? They still speak Yiddish. I mean, they can, of course, speak Hebrew if they are in Israel and even in other places there, because the texts are mostly Hebrew, but they still speak Yiddish. And this tzaddik is a kind of mediating figure to the heavenly powers, and he is often a miracle worker, okay, and a healer. He clearly stands in religious, historical terms, one would say, he stands in a shamanistic tradition, okay? He lives with his entourage, his followers, the Hasidim. They're called the Hasid is one, and Hasidim is the plural. The pious ones in a court-like environment, and is often succeeded by his son, one of his sons, or a close relative, and such is forming dynasties. You may know that each pious Jew is obliged to observe the 613 commandments, which are in a way are a distillation out of the Torah, yeah? And both Torot, one has to say, but the Hasidim also show, besides this strict, more or less strict observance is always hard to say, because it's not such a personal matter, but it's fluid, it's mobile, okay? They also show an ecstatic behavior and collectivity, they sing and they dance, they even drink, which is quite unusual for Judaism. They're only very singular, so to say, events, mostly religious events where you're obliged then to drink. On Shabbat you can drink, and of course on Purim, which is the kind of carnival. And on the other hand, they have a deep communication with God. Dvekut is this called. This is also typical of them. So they have, one could say, these two poles of extraordinary ecstatic behavior. Okay? Oops. Wrong. So now the maps. The red one is the greatest expansion of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth in 1619, and you see that it's the red. The Commonwealth is put over the, so to say, the borders, the state borders of now. Huh? Most of the what we would call perhaps Middle Osteuropa was covered then, and it's from the Baltic Sea to the Black Sea. there are several tragedies with this Commonwealth. Not only that it collapsed, as you know, Poland was diminishing from as a territory from the maps in the late 18th century, and the second great catastrophe, one could say, was, you can see them from here. The right map is the so-called Pale of Jewish Settlements, or in German, Jüdischer Siedlungsrayon, created by Catherine the Great after the Polish so to say, Teilungen, divisions. And as you can see, it's a kind of, one could say, barrier of Russia towards the West. Yeah? And here, most of the Jews, almost all of the Jews of Tsarist Russia were concentrated. Only after the revolution of 1905, they were allowed also to settle in bigger cities like Petersburg and Moscow or different places. But still, most of them stayed there because the situation was that this was a kind of Jewish homeland, one could say. Yeah? There were villages where most of the population was Jewish, and the tragedy was that when the Wehrmacht attacked the Soviet Union, they started there. See, so when they were powerful, they had, in driving into the Soviet Union, they had all the Jews, which of course then they either shot them at the spot or brought them to the concentration camps. See? So. Some of them could, of course, flee, but it was one of the tragedies that there was this, one could say, immediate contact between the enemies, so to say. Huh? Here on the left side, you have another map, which is also showing the different strands of Yiddish. It's not so interesting for us, but you see, it's called Jewish Lithuania, which insofar is also important that in Jewish Eastern Europe, one could, in a way, divide the whole map into two sections. One would be Lithuania, which, by the way, was the more rational part of East European Jewry, about which I will not tell you so much. I'm telling you more about the magic and mystical, which is in Podolia and Volhynia. So this is, so to say, a major difference. And you see now, I've chosen, of course, the Ukraine, Eastern Europe almost without Jews. That's the situation now. Isn't even changed, as you know, the Crimea and part of the Eastern Ukraine are now, so to say, Russian, not formally Russian, but the occupied territories. We would, in a way, have to locate most of the activities of Rabbi Nachman in the western part of the Ukraine up to the Black Sea. Okay, that's the territory. That's so to say the heartland, not only of Rabbi Nachman but of Hasidism. Okay. I said I'm more interested today in the magical Jewish, the magical world of Il mondo magico of Jewish Eastern Europe. Il mondo magico is not only Italian, but it's a term by Ernesto De Martino, an Italian anthropologist who, in a way, discovered this magical world on the other end of Europe, in the Salento, in the very southeastern part of the Italian peninsula, so to say, the other side of the pilgrimage passages that were orientated towards the Slavic side, but if they should have looked on the other side, so to say, when passing from Venice to Jerusalem on the right side, they would have also seen this mondo magico. What is so interesting is that one could say in this mondo magico the deaths are not dead. No, they are alive, and they in a way share the world with living. They coexist with them. They are believed to come to pray in the synagogue during the night, but the magical rites are, of course, rites who are not only concerned with the past, with the dead, but also with the future. One famous example are the young girls who secretly meet in the mikveh, in the ritual bathing house, to find out by certain rituals whom they will later have to marry, and if it's not their favorites, they try to manipulate it. Okay, so it's really magic. Okay, I mean, and of course, magic we know doesn't exist as such, but magic is a kind of practice to, in a way, connect one's own individual fate with a kind of collective fate. Yeah? So, and to reintegrate. Out of, one could say, to get rid of one's own fate and have the fate of all, okay, which is hoped to be a lucky one. Very important in this case is also that people might be possessed by a demon, which is called in Hebrew Dybbuk. You may have heard of it. Dybbuk comes from the Hebrew word which meaning anhaften, so in a way staying very close to someone. It's a possession. Most of the possessed peoples are, of course, the women, yeah? Because usually it has to do with an unlucky love affair. I mean, if dreamed affair or actual affair, we will see. They are cured, or one tries to cure them by exorcistic practices. But there in this magic world you have also legends like that of Adam's other wife Lilith, the queen of the demons and the murder of babies, and especially as a homage to you, also the figure of the golem as an artificially created man-machine figures prominently, and you know the first one who in a way made a demon was Rabbi Yehuda Löw of Prague, the so-called Maharal, in the 16th century. Okay, this mondo magico doesn't, in a way, doesn't get lost. It has its own Nachleben. One quite famous example is the performance of one of the play of one of the most famous Yiddish writers of around 1900 and of Eastern Europe, Anski. Okay. The Dybbuk, and it was performed by the Habimah, which later become the national Israeli theater in Moscow, in the Yiddish theater in the 1920s. And you see the famous actress Hanna Rovina as Leah. Leah is the female hero, and this performance was directed by Yevgeny Vakhtangov, so the very prominent figures. Yeah. And you see this very expressionistic, I mean now. So for you as the art historian's performance, yeah? Leah is the unhappy one. She should marry a boy she's not in love with. The one she was in love with has died out of sorrow and grief, but he comes back as a Dybbuk and she's possessed by him. She seems to be cured, but in a final breakdown, which we see here, he in a way surrenders to her love and dies. Okay, so that's one could say the unhappy ending, perhaps the happy ending of Leah. We do not know. Okay, and so this is typical of the Jewish theater around 1900, one could say, and in some way it has also the first silent movies. They are very much modeled after this expressionistic Jewish performative style. Yeah? Mm-hmm. And this would be one example of Nachleben, okay? Because of course the Habimah, they are no, most of them were not observant Jews, but still they were, so to say, their Dybbuk was the Dybbuk of the others. Okay. The founding figure of Hasidism is the so-called Baal Schem Tov, or the Besht. In Judaism, one usually has abbreviations of this long name, so the Maharal, the Besht. Baal Schem Tov is a translation. It's a kind of nickname. It means master of the good name. Okay, Baal, master, Shem Tov, good name, and the good name is of course the name of God. And by invocating this secret name or names of God, the Besht was able to work miracles and to heal the living and to release the dead from sufferings and rebirth. Yeah? May also be new to you that in this magical world of Judaism, there's a strong belief in rebirth, okay, which of course is not typical of standard Judaism, but the souls who are not released are cursed to, in a way, find new bodies. Okay, so and the tzaddik is the one who can stop this, which is good for the dead and good for the living. He becomes the center of numerous legends. There is one could say he produces also literature. Okay. Mainly not by himself, but by his followers. Gershom Scholem, the great scholar of Jewish mysticism I have mentioned before, sees a very important element in Hasidism as such, and started by the Baal Schem Tov, that the dynamics of messianism are neutralized by the figure of the tzaddik. Okay? Martin Buber said Baal Schem Tov, in a way, positioned his teaching against Spinoza, even without knowing Spinoza, quite paradoxically, but Spinoza is here, one could say, the etiquette for philosophy as the end of the personal God, okay? So with Spinoza, Deus sive natura, there's no personal relation to God. This is the end, but also against Sabbatai Zevi, okay? I pronounce him differently, it's Sabbatai Zevi, but let me call him Sabbatai Zevi. You may have heard from him now for the first time. He is, so to say, the inventor of the so-called heretical Kabbalah, which would be the end of Judaism as such. Okay, and now I will say some words on Sabbatai Zevi and what is the heretical Kabbalah. Sabbatai Zevi was a Sephardi, meaning you may know that the main distinction of religious Jews up to, let's say, up to Napoleon is that between the German Jews, the so-called German Jews, even if they are living in Eastern Europe, the Ashkenazim, and the Sephardim, which are the Spanish or Oriental Jews, which first lived in Spanish and Portugal, then were repulsed from there and lived then in the Ottoman Empire. Okay, and Sabbatai Zevi is a Sephardi. He was a charismatic figure proclaiming that sometimes the violation of the Torah could become its true fulfillment, okay? Which is very heretic. Okay? See, I mean, being happy on a day where you have to mourn is a grave sin. Having sexual intercourse with a woman who is not allowed to do it because she has her menstruation, or it's shortly after childbirth or whatsoever, is grave sin, okay? Or eating several things you're not allowed to eat, grave sin. And he declared it, no, it's fulfillment, okay? He was proclaimed Messiah at the new year of 1665, and which set the whole Jewish world in a frenzy. I mean, one could say from Baghdad to Amsterdam, Jews sold their fortunes, sold their houses, and started to travel to Israel. Because to Palestine then, because to Jerusalem, to the holy sites there, because it was expected that Sabbatai Zevi would enter the Holy Land, Palestine, with an army and would first go to Istanbul to get rid of the Sultan, make the Sultan to his slave, and he did travel to, I mean, he was living mainly in what we now would say Turkey. He traveled to Istanbul but was immediately arrested by the Sultan and his police, and then was forced either to die or to convert. And he converted to Islam, okay? Which is, of course, I mean, the main sin you could ever do, okay? There in Judaism, there are only 3 reasons when it's better to be killed than to stay alive. Yeah? The one is, so to say, grave sexual sins, like incest. Yeah? The second one would be killing someone. Yeah? And the third one would be, this is what he did, converting. Yeah? So he converted to Islam and became part of the Sultan's court for a time. Most of his followers, of course, broke with him, but so to say, a certain group stayed with him, and they themselves became officially Muslims, but still followed Jewish rites in secrecy. Yeah? The reason for this is that, and this is very important for the understanding of the whole affair, that in all of what I was saying, there is an exoteric and an esoteric meaning. I mean, it's not that I put it on, but it's of course, it's a mystic practices, and they have the meaning for the outsiders. For them, he was an apostate, okay? Grave sinner. But in the exoteric meaning, of course, he had to do it, he had to suffer from it, because he has to go down to the depth to save the souls of the gravest sinners, okay? So to save the sinners, he also has to become a sinner, okay? This is the meaning of that, according to Sabbatai Zevi and his followers, the meaning of the apostasy. But see, compared to his follower Jakob Frank, he was a nice guy, because Jakob Frank was, I mean, really the climax of religious nihilism, one Sholem called him. He not only was very ignorant, he knew nothing from rabbinic tradition or the mystic tradition, which he claimed was better, as he became the ideal prostic. Prostic is a mixture of Polish, Russian, and in a way the Hebrew understanding or Yiddish understanding. A very simple man. Yeah. So the man in Kafka, the man who is coming to the gate and has to wait. Yeah. So that's the prostic. But the prostic is able to descend to the people in order to bind their souls and save them. So he's, so to say, he does what Sabbatai Zevi did for the sinners, for the dead sinners, Jakob Frank did for the common people alive. But what he actually did was that he, in a way, traveled through all the Western religions possible. He started in Judaism, was then very interested in Polish Catholicism, yeah? Led a first disputation with rabbinic authorities in Kamieniec Podolski against the Talmud, and of course the bishop of Kamieniec Podolski said, "You are right," so the Talmud was burned. Yeah? But then the bishop died, which of course was for the so to say the Jewish side gain. Now they proved that he was wrong. Frank fled to the Ottoman Empire and became Muslim. Okay, only to return to Poland to convert to Catholicism. Okay, with 500 of his followers. He was later arrested for quite a while. Then went to the Czech lands. You have a lot of his followers, and then ended finally at near Frankfurt at Offenbach, where he and his daughter Eva had a kind of court. So here you see them. What is so interesting perhaps is that both Sabbatai Zevi and Jakob Frank are dressed in an Oriental way. Yeah? They are Turks, so to say. Yeah? While Eva looks like one could say a German landlady, yeah? So a Western landlady. The court existed until Eva's death in the 1810s. Okay, so now let's go to Rabbi Nachman. Rabbi Nachman was the great-grandson of the Besht, of the Baal Schem Tov. His mother was the granddaughter. He grew himself up at the Hasidic court. His uncle was the head of, who was a kind of Wunderrebbe, but Nachman left it. One reason was that he married at 13, which was usual at the time. Yeah? And as he was so to say, an intellectual, yeah, he didn't take his wife into his house, but went to hers. Okay, that's typical of this traditional Judaism. If you are a rich man and if you have a daughter, you marry her to an intellectual, so to say, to a rabbi or a future rabbi, even better to a tzaddik, to become part of this, one could say, religious sphere. Okay, from May 1798 to July the following year, he traveled to the Holy Land, and that's the period, of course, we are interested in. Since 1802, he's in Bratzlaw, where he gives his lectures and tells his tales, so on and so on. He claims to be the tzaddik hador, which means the tzaddik of his generation. Okay, there is a so to say a kind of strife or a conflict within Eastern European Hasidism. Who is the most important? Who is the tzaddik hador? And he claims to be the one. Of course, he had a lot of conflicts. He dies of tuberculosis and is buried in Uman, now in the Ukraine, and he has no successor. It's quite important. Yeah. The group of his followers still exists. They are the so-called Bratzlawers, but they have no spiritual leader. They have one, him, but he's dead. Okay? But it works. So this is the gravesite at Uman now. It has become, especially after the collapse of the Soviet Union, one of the most frequently visited Jewish holy sites. Yeah? Especially at the end of September, beginning of October, when the New Year is coming, the Jewish New Year, which is the very, very high day of festivity, together with Yom Kippur. 10 days later, they spent this period there, but it was also a holy site around 1900. Just to give you some impressions. And these are the Bratzlawers. They are so-called the dead Hasidim because their leader is dead. Okay, but as you see, they are quite alive. They are missionizing, mostly among Jews, but sometimes also Goyim, which is quite special for Judaism. Usually, Jews only proselyting among themselves, because there's the figure is not so much to bring someone from the outside in, but the figure is to create what is called balim chuvot, meaning people who are turning back to the tradition. Okay, that's a very important figure in Judaism. Okay, so let's go to the. You can still breathe? I hope so. Let's go to the Nachman's travel to the Holy Land. You will soon find out there's a principle in this very strange travel, and you will immediately realize how much this kind of pilgrimage, if one may call it a pilgrimage, differs from not only what you were doing, but of our standing what the pilgrimage could be. And this I would actually like to debate with you. You see, there are 5 main parts. To Istanbul, in Istanbul, the sea travel to Eretz Yisrael, time in Eretz Yisrael, and back to Podolia. Okay? And now let's look in short what the main events were there. You can see this. I have to take this, sorry. See, I knew it that I would. Here is the starting point, and he goes up here. Yeah, and then boards a ship and goes to Istanbul, okay? And the back trip, he lands here at the mouth of the Danube and is then going back. So he's going full circle, and this is, so to say, the Eastern European part of the circle. What is so interesting is that Rabbi Nachman doesn't turn directly to Istanbul, which one must say what Venice is for the Christian of Western European, Central European Christians is of course Istanbul for the Eastern Jews. Yeah, it's their place to go, out of several reasons. Because there's a kind of, we have seen with Jakob Frank is a kind of green border. Yeah, you could easily cross them, and of course. This is an important element. Within the Ottoman Empire, there was no discrimination of Jews comparable to some which happened, not only the pogroms but also other hardships in Christian Europe. Okay, they could live quite easily there. The only thing was that they couldn't attend higher political offices, couldn't become authorities, and had to pay a certain tax. Okay, so one could say of course, he would go to Istanbul. What is in a way astonishing was that he doesn't go directly to Istanbul. First, he visits the gravesite of the Besht, of his great-grandfather. This one could understand somehow, so to say, getting some support from the Besht, from the founder. But if we in a way follow it with more scrutiny, we find out that he immediately starts a kind of rivalry with the great-grandfather, because the Besht also wanted to go to the Holy Land, but couldn't come further than Istanbul. Okay, so then the second stop, important stop, is Kamieniec Podolski. Okay, which is completely strange. It's even more strange as after the problems which were arose by the Frankists, by Jakob Frank and his follower, this city was forbidden to Jews. Okay, they could enter the city during day to do their business, but they were not allowed to stay there overnight. And Rabbi Nachman stayed there overnight. Okay, so this is strange. What is also in a way strange is that he didn't travel in a group, which was usual also for Jews going to the Holy Land, but he traveled only with one follower, and even this follower he frequently said, "Return, return." Okay. Okay. So when he arrived in Istanbul, he stayed there for quite a while, and did strange things. First, he didn't get into contact to the community there. One could say, of course, it's a Sephardic community, and he's Ashkenaz. They have different rites, they have different forms to pray, and so they keep different, but still one would get in contact somehow. Yeah, because it's also important to know from them when the next ship leaves for the Holy Land. But he didn't do it, and he also hides his identity. He fools the people who ask him who he is. He tells lies, and something he says, "I'm this one," then another one, so they are very angry. And he does real other foolish things, like walking improperly dressed in the streets, only in the underwear, without the head, with just only the cap, which of course you couldn't do. He's playing childish games, war games, and remember, this is the time when Napoleon invaded Egypt, so the Ottomans were quite nervous. Huh? So, okay. He later called this foolish, childish things katnut, which is a Hebrew for smallness. If you translate it literally, it's smallness. Okay, and this katnut will come with him, will travel with him to the Holy Land. Finally, he boards a ship which should arrive at Jaffa, which was one of the two seaports. If we want to enter Palestine, the other was Haifa, and it was said it would land there before Rosh Hashanah, before New Year. Heavy storm breaks out, or are said to break out. Everyone cries and prays except Rabbi Nachman. He's silent, and the other passengers say, "Come on, help us! What's going on? We are going to have a catastrophe, and you do not pray." And he only commands them to follow his example. They obey, and they are saved. Okay, the storm ceases, which is gadlut, greatness. Okay, and you see, from now on, this is a kind of, one could say, etude in gadlut, greatness, and katnut, smallness. That's the grid of the whole travel. The Osman authorities do not allow him to enter the port of Jaffa when the ship anchors. No one knows why. It's later explained, okay, this was the spot at the port of Jaffa where the prophet Jonah was thrown into the sea. So he has to leave, and the ship heads for Haifa, where he's finally landing on the night before Rosh Hashanah. Yeah? You may know that in Judaism, the day begins when the sun goes down in the evening before, which is called Erev, so to say. The evening before the actual day is the first part of the day. So he is in time, so to say. Once in Haifa, he declares that he has reached his goal and he wants to immediately return home. Okay. He becomes deeply melancholic, doesn't want to see anyone, and later visits the prophet Elias' cave at Mount Carmel, where he becomes happy again. So I do not insert the play between Katnut and Gatlut all the time. You can read it here. He gets to know an Arab youth, which is also, quite normal because it's a lot of Arabs are living there until today, as we know. But what is so strange is that the Arab first wants to kill Rabbi Nachman, but then gives him his donkey, to move freely, so lends him his car, so to say. And Rabbi Nachman has been invited to visit the Hasidic communities at Tiberias, which are at the lake Gennesaret. We know this place, of course, also from the Christian tradition. There, since 50, 60 years, some East European Jews live in communities. Yeah? And there's also the grave of the grandfather, not the great-grandfather, the Besht, but the grandfather, also called Nachman of Horodenka. Rabbi Nachman the Younger visits the gravesite and has a vision of the patriarchs, which is, the patriarchs are Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. These are the three patriarchs, and he has a vision there. But then he refuses to go to Jerusalem and decides to leave Eretz Yisrael. Okay, so you see, he's half a years there, but still he doesn't. There would be other places he could, of course, also visit. What is perhaps also interesting is that he has the vision not at the grave of the patriarchs themselves in Hebron, but at the gravesite of his grandfather. So it's even more difficult, of course, to have a vision not at the grave of the patriarchs. And this is not only quite a nice picture, it's also you can see how this kind of nocturnal meditation has been happening until now. Yeah, it's in the 30s, but it would still be a practice of meditation for Hasidim. Okay, they would still do it. Meron is another place where the grave of the famous Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, very important figure not only for the Talmud but also for the Kabbalah as such, is buried. Okay, and you would, of course, this is also something we could discuss or we could compare to relics, so to say. See, this is also a kind of contact. Yeah, not so much to a relic as the body, but to the space. Yeah. I would say this could be a link, perhaps, in the debate. Okay, he decides to go back to Podolia in March and finds a ship which is leaving Haifa and is immediately arrested as a French spy. Okay, and almost killed, but saved. During a stop at Rhodes, the Jewish community of the island pays a ransom to free him, and together they celebrate Pesach. Yeah? Pesach is the second great Jewish festival. No? The one are the 10 days from Jewish New Year to Yom Kippur in September, and the other one is Pesach, usually March, April. Okay, Pesach is the festival when Jewish community commemorate the liberation from Egypt. Okay, when they left Egypt. Okay, when Moses of course, God liberated from the Pharaoh. Okay, then Rabbi Nachman continues his travel. He lands at the mouth of the Danube and then travels now in German clothes. Okay, to Podolia. German clothes is like Christian clothes. Okay, and of course not Turkish clothes, but also not Jewish. So it's strange. And finally, he returns to the place and is praised. And then, some years later, one could say 3 years later, he starts his own court. He's not a wonder worker. He never did any miracles. He was very, so to say, interested in teaching, in interpreting the Torah, and one could say two principles of a possible interpretation could be, first, what I already mentioned, this difference, or the not only difference. It's a combination of the exoteric and esoteric meaning. Yeah. Both of the text and the actions, which is important, and the figure himself, one could say, but also between the Torah, what St. Paul calls nomos, law, and its fulfillment in halakha. Halakha is this 613 commandments, which Michel Joaquin calls pantomime hermeneutique. Okay, he says this behavior is a hermeneutic operation. Okay, it's a performance of the text, of the holy text, actually. Okay, so and this we could discuss if you like. Thank you. It's the end.
Unexpected end. I was ending for one last step, and it's okay.
Now we should. I think we should discuss it. See, the problem. I mean, these are my cards. The problem is that, of course, the missing sentence was on katnut and gadlut and on smallness and greatness. What does it mean? It's very complicated. I can, of course, say something to it, but it would us lead deeply into Kabbalistic understanding of this. See, in Kabbalah, at a certain point, for all the Jewish mystics we were talking about today, for them, the God of revelation is a double one. It's the personal God of revelation, so to say, for the community, but it's also a machine. It's a revelatory machine, which is working in itself, out of itself, in a catastrophic way, also in a benevolent way, and where the tzaddik tries to fix it, okay? And God has a problem, so problem with himself, so to say. Creation is a catastrophe. When creation happened, there was a big catastrophe, the Urknall, so to say, and the tzaddikim are the machinists of this hell machine. They want to repair it. That's all about it, and they do it by katnut and gadlut, in both, becoming great, becoming very small, ascending and descending, first. Second is that the two movements are also movements of, so to say, God in himself. In himself, in God himself is this movement between Katlut and Gadnut, okay? And the third aspect is that this movement is one which is conceived in, one would say, highly erotic terms, okay? So, to understand this, it would take, I would say, another lecture. So it's just a hint what is behind these two concepts if we take them within Jewish mysticism, but I think we could discuss it on another level, see? Without, so to say, we could discuss it on an exoteric level, I would suggest. Okay? And I think we do not lose so much if we discuss it on that level.
Okay, so I hope you are, I see a bit of lost faces, which is great, because we were discussing, like, often, especially the Advent, the necessity to go out from art history and go out from our general studies, because don't having any more proper information secondary school without any basis of philosophy, very bad knowledge in history, we are lost outside of this small world which is our world. And I would say that one of the reasons why I wanted to have something really different here was also to feel this universality and particularity of our approach, which pushes us to some limits. So I understand that maybe some of you are a bit lost because we were...
Yeah, of course, you're completely lost, I suppose, but that's nice. I mean, that's the start of something new.
No, because for me, if I can start with something really fascinating. In the travel, which is linked with this double attitude. So, small and big is one way of describing it. I would say ridiculous and very, like, triumphalist can be the second dichotomy, and the third one can be maybe richness and poverty, if I understand it well. And richness and poverty not in the sense of money, of course, but in something inside. And I would say that in this probably quite Jude paradoxically way, there is described the feeling of the pilgrimage in himself. Because the pilgrimage push you to do three. Michele was speaking about the person arriving to Venice who have to like take their high level of being in the society and to share into the shape to the Holy Land this poor life, become small in order to then get the meeting with the holy places, but also we experience in a certain sense this double attitude, because you are sitting on the floor, our clothes were not exactly, let's say, nice, we were not smelling very well, and more we were like on the way, and the more we experienced the opposite, which was that people were interested in us. So experiencing the poverty and the smallness, you are paradoxically touching the completely other level. So what's quite interesting for me is that in the anecdotic way, and also we have also imagined what Rabbi did really. I mean, one thing is what he narrates about this travel, isn't it? And the second was the travel was for sure. I don't know the historical travel, but let's say that this narration is speaking about how you can be transformed by the pilgrimage as something which is the initiatory step. He becomes Rabbi, returning back.
Right.
So the fullness and the seriousness, poverty and triumphalism, and through that and the traveling, you are becoming back as a new man, and then you can become Rabbi.
Right.
So that's for me like a really deep lesson of this tradition. Habimah is agree, which is nice because they will get there.
Is this story about fool and foolish and wise and big and small? It made me think about the Russian fool for Christ, and I think it can be linked to the question of pilgrimage and to the status of pilgrim, but maybe in the sense that the fool of Christ is on the border of the society and is in the zone of liminality, being very accepted and being very rejected, and the pilgrim is also on this level. But I saw in this case more this parallel with the foolish for Christ, Russian one, but in fact it can be the same principle of behavior and on the social status and on the also discourse, how to explain something.
Everybody knows why we follow in Christ in the Russian tradition? Yes? Yeah? Really? No, great. The class, like the Eurogimi, are those persons who are crazy for Christ, Eurogimi. And so on one hand they are like walking naked into the street, not without head or completely naked if necessary. And
Yeah, he had his underwear on, so he was.
yeah, it is. So like this really crazy aspect, and they are living like on the street almost like homeless. They can live as pure homeless. On the other hand, into the Russian tradition, they are the only one allowed, for example, to go to the Tsar and tell him the truth. So there is like this complete opposite between the fullness and the. But what's for me, where I would disagree, if I understand it well, of course the Rabbi is the figure who is like holding in himself many paradoxes, but this revelation of the double nature, of this double nature, is through the pilgrimage. So it's something which starts at a certain point, finishes at another point, because part of the constitutive legend of the transformation of the human being who is back as a rabbi now.
And sorry, just I would agree. I mean, also with, of course, the Fool of Christ, or in Catholicism, Saint Francis, of course, would be the figure behaving in this kind of way, very provocative, but out of a certain reason, to in a way die for this world, one could say, and another one. This would not be so typical of Judaism, because the concept of salvation in Judaism is a very earthly one. It's the Messianic age. It's not going up to heaven or somewhere. It's being here, in so to say, in the best of all possible worlds. That's one distinction. One should say, or one other aspect comes in. But of course, you're right. It's a certain type within the phenomenology of religion. You find schools of God or gods also in India, of course. So, what is so interesting is, and I think you both of you stressed it correctly, that he was only able to become this tzaddik and so to say the tzaddik hador of his generation after this journey, okay, after this travel. Before it was impossible, and from this experience he was quite provocative, but not so much in his doing foolish things, but by his interpretation, okay. Which is interesting, as in a way he somehow turned back to the more accepting way of being exceptional, becoming teaching, being a tzaddik. What was perhaps the main difference is what he always refrained from, which is somehow, of course, also a problem, one could say, that he refused to work as a healer, okay? Which was one of the main tasks of the, I mean, there were, one could say, the tzaddikim were what now a psychoanalyst is. Yeah? If you want to have a child and it's impossible, try a psychoanalysis and perhaps it will work. I mean, see, or go to the tzaddik, it may work. Yeah, and this he refused. Okay, but still, in a way, was able to. Also, of course, the tales have also this esoteric and exoteric meaning. Yeah? They have, the esoteric would be mystical teaching, and the exoteric is literature. You can read them as literature, no problem. This is, of course, different from all we know of, one would say, an result to be expected after a Christian pilgrimage. You wouldn't say, I make a pilgrimage because I want to become pregnant, or I make a pilgrimage because I want to write literature, I want to get rid of my sins. And in a way, this is not so much the case here. I mean, usually the ordinary career would be you go as a 5-year-old boy to the cheder, to the elementary school. Then they find out that you are gifted, and then they train you, or you in a way become a student, yeshiva bocher, a young man attending, so to say, kind of academy. I mean, it's not really an academy, but you go to the synagogue and have a teacher and read the commentaries, and you spend all your time reading, discussing, and debating. And then, if you are more than talented, usually you would marry then with very young. Yeah, they go to the house of your father-in-law, and he will give the money for the household. You have a kind of stipend, so to say, and then you would be ordained rabbi after a while, yeah? And then you can apply for a post, so to say. This would be the ordinary career, okay?
Rabbi and tzaddik, should one be the second, or?
No, it could be the same, but of course, to become a rabbi, it's possible without. Tzaddik is a certain charismatic, in some way charismatic, but also, of course, one could say traditional qualification, traditional insofar that if you are in these dynasties, okay, then you for the gifted of the sons or nephews or great nephews, he could be the successor of the tzaddik. So in a way, it's a mixture, yeah. But to become a rabbi, it's like if you're studying art history and become professor. So you have to apply after you've passed the qualification. And this is, of course, it's a kind of liminal passage, a rite passage, yeah. So there are some you could compare it, of course. The thing where it falls out, I would also say to the pairs of opposition you very correctly constructed, would also something between how to live. It's not really opposition, it's more so to say a problem. How to live as a Jew in a Christian surrounding or in a Muslim surrounding, okay? Of course you have the same problem in Palestine. This is also something, yeah? And what is also, I think, quite interesting is that compared to what we heard mostly from Michele, this is the trip of a single person, so to say. He has one follower, come on, and this one follower he wanted to send back after some time. And the other expeditions, also your traveling was in a group, see? That's one of, I would say, makes also a main difference. Huh? It's a main difference. Huh? Okay.
I would like to ask on which sources are based these narratives? Like he had his own diary, or this man who accompanied him?
Okay, yeah, I didn't do this, but of course I have to answer it. We have different sources. No one is. He didn't write. Of course he could write, but was able to write. But all of what we have is written down by his followers. But published very soon after his death in 1812. So most people think that as it has been published so quickly, the legendary stuff is there, but it's not just fabrication. See, there is, so to say, a kind of hard kernel in the stories. And it was written. He had a master pupil, and he published most of not only the tales and not only the report of the travel, which was a certain part of his biography, okay, but also his teachings. Yeah? The Likutei Maharan, which means, if you translate it, the teachings of Rabbi Nachman, okay? What is so interesting at least in the teachings, is that there was a kind of also this esoteric-exoteric thing, published where, so to say, most of the teachings, but some were kept within the group, okay? And where only part of them has only recently been found within the last decade, so to say, because of course the group still exists, the Bratzlawer, and they keep part of the teachings still to themselves. But he didn't. He did. One problem is, of course, that he didn't report as I did from his travel, saying I did this and then I experienced this and then this happened. They were part of his teachings, where he in a way meditated or spoke about his travel, and he spoke a lot about his travel. And when his master student composed the biography, he in a way took this, he not constructed this travel, but he, out of the teaching, he took the episodes. And of course there was the one student who was coming with him, who later didn't become the master pupil, but he was also, he outlived Rabbi Nachman, so he could have testified against it. Okay. Mm.
But for me, it sounds like there is a certain kind of a stylization, let's say, because otherwise, firstly, from the part of the Nachman himself, because he was like later telling to his pupils what happened.
Mm-hmm.
And also the stylization, the fact that it was published after his death.
Mm-hmm.
So I think in order to construct somebody like this, I don't know, like the how did you say, the just one.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that for me, it sounds like that.
Mm-hmm.
Like the force to create certain, let's say, it's maybe strong word hagiography, but something.
Now, of course, it's definitely hagiographic, but see, it was actually the principle that the tzaddik himself doesn't publish it. It's all with the pupils. It was also with the Besht. We have a so to say, a book about the life and deeds of the Besht, the founder, the great-grandfather of Nachman, and it was also not written by himself, but by students. This is a kind of pious principle, one could say. Yeah? I mean, don't forget that this society is or this culture, one would say, this religious culture has a kind is a double-headed one. There's so much in Scripture. I mean, I think Judaism is one of the most scriptural religious cultures ever, yeah. But still, they have a very strong oral practice, so to say, a technique, yeah, which is not due to the concept that what is less important is memorized or transmitted orally for quite. On the contrary, sometimes that which is, so to say, burning in the lightest fire can only be transmitted orally, because only then this dualism of esoteric, exoteric can be maintained. Do you understand?
Yes, and if it can be found some like prefiguration for
Yeah.
this travel.
I mean, for the travel, yes. I said first the great-grandfather tried to do it, but failed. And I mean, he failed because he had the problem in Istanbul. He didn't do the foolish things. He behaved ordinary, so he couldn't leave Istanbul. So, and not because, see, the construction behind this is that you do not have only problems with money or with your health or with the weather or with the food or with the Ottomans or with the Christians. You have problems with demonic powers, so to say. They hinder you. Yeah? I mean, for us it's of course strange, but that's, one could say, the catastrophic aspect of creation hinders you. Yeah? And even the Besht couldn't do it. Yeah? The grandfather succeeded, but he stayed in Tiberias. See? So he also didn't come to terms. One could, of course, say there is a deep, I mean, psychoanalytically spoken, one could say it's a deeper conflict in the whole, or a conflict, a rivalry between generations, yeah? And he has a very phallic side. And I mean, sorry to say it, perhaps it's too simple, but also this Katnut-Gatlut thing is a very phallic affair. I mean, of course, yeah. So, great and very small. I mean, it has this aspect. It's so much. And on the other side, on the, so to say, Jewish religious cultural aspect, of course, what Sabbatai Zevi and Jakob Frank did were also things like this. I mean, they didn't travel to the Holy Land, but they also tried to come to terms with the catastrophe of the catastrophic elements of creation. Yeah? Which, what is very important, it has nothing to do with original sin or something like this. No? It's not that man didn't observe in the Garden of Eden the commandment of God. Of course, it's in the Hebrew Bible, but the catastrophe of the creation happens within God. Okay. When he, so to say, part of, to say, make it very short, part of God is the Deus absconditus, it exists somewhere, okay? But the God of revelation, in a way, emanates in 10 so-called sephirot, which are positions, yeah? Like mercy, like justice, okay? Things like wisdom. It's a very Neoplatonic substructure of the whole thing, okay? And the so to say, figuration of this creation is that divine light emanates from the Deus absconditus in certain vessels, so to say, in not bottles, in Gefäße, in vessels, okay? And they break, okay? They break. So the light is spilled over the cosmos, so to say, but it's not the cosmos because the cosmos is constructed between the nothing, so to say. Yeah? Okay, which of course is a catastrophe, as in Revelation everything goes wrong. Okay, it's a very, one could say, Kafkaesque sort of creation, and now not God Himself tries to repair it, but man does it. Okay. This is, of course, a major difference to Christian conceptions of, so to say, doing good deeds. Because even when it's acknowledged at all, like in Catholicism and other, of course, Christian confessions, you do it for yourself. You can do it sometimes for the beloved death, yeah? If you want to save them, yeah? You can, let's celebrate Mass, but never for God. I mean, how could it be? And in Judaism, it's so to say, for the divine catastrophe. Yeah? And to do this, because the problem is that in the moment when the vessels break, evil is created too. Okay. The other side of God, so to say. Yeah? The primal catastrophe creates evil. God is good, He's not evil, but this catastrophe makes evil possible. Okay, so and in the heretical Kabbalah with Sabbatai Zevi, and there is, of course, the concept is by great mystic Isaac Luria, who is some generation before Sabbatai Zevi, is the concept that the mystic is possible to collect these sparks after the catastrophe, and in a way bring them back and really make a kind of reparation of this process. Yeah? There's a special term, tikkun. Tikkun is this kind of lifting up the fallen sparks, okay, and bringing them in the position where they should have once been. Okay, and this whole problem, this whole process, in a way, becomes, one could say, in the heretical Kabbalah, nihilistic towards Judaism itself, destroys the traditional Jewish life, and Hasidism tries to make, so to say, on another level, a kind of reparation of this, one could say, second catastrophe. See? The heretical Kabbalists, in a way, couldn't do it. They became apostates. So a new effort was necessary, and the tzaddikim tried to do it. So one could say this is the whole process. What still is left, that is very provocative and very on the exoteric side, nihilistic aspect, is still somehow kept. Okay? When he is running almost naked through the streets of Istanbul, for instance. Yeah? And also one could say this very manic depressive side, which was so, in a way, perhaps really one could say the personal aspect which Sabbatai Zevi above all brought in. Yeah? One could say he was, in a clinical sense, maniac and depressive on the other side. In a more domesticated or in a tamed way, it's what this Gatlut Katnut thing is all about. Yeah? This greatness and this depressive side of it. Yeah? And this has to be performed, okay?
I'm thinking of this Shadio Haman, it's like a cartoon which is about a Jewish cat living in Northern Africa in the 20s. And at a certain point, he's living with a rabbi. And he's trying to understand the difference between Christianity and Judaism. And so the cat resumes the difference in the following way. In Christianity you have thesis, antithesis, synthesis. In Judaism you have thesis, antithesis, 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 antithesis.
That's true, yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, it has to do also with, one could say, the inner structure of the religious culture. I said in Judaism it's mainly commentary, okay? And of course commentary never comes to an end, because it's the commentary of the commentary of the I mean, really, if you look at the Talmud, this corpus of rabbinical writings, you have the holy text in the middle, and then on the margins you have the commentaries. And everyone who edits the Talmud, and if he is a scholar, he can put his own commentary on the page, and no one can say it's not possible. Huh?
Rabbi Kessler, who is one of our close friends, and he's, from a Chicago community, he was Jew, he's Jew, but he was like practicing and then not. We often discuss why the best art historians of the 20th century dealing with Christian art are Jews. We are not sure if Kurt Weizmann was Jude or not, but his wife for sure was Jude. Ernst Kitzinger was Jude. Herbert Kessler is Jude. And there is Richard Krautheimer was Jude. They all lived Germany in the 30s, and there's a strong Jewish presence into the, let's say, scholarship of late antique Christian world. And the Herb's hypothesis is what exactly you thought now, that they are trained to be critical, let's say, researchers in humanities, because they're like information is that you have a document, text, an object, and you have to search to interpret it, knowing for sure that you'll never reach the truth, but you are searching for. And that's like what we are doing with medieval pilgrim now. We are following him, knowing that we'll never offend him. We have no hope to touch with our hand medieval pilgrim. We'll never do it. But we are still trying.
I mean, that's in so far very, very wise what you say. There's even in traditional Judaism, in the Talmud, this corpus of rabbinic writing, a saying by a famous rabbi who is discussing with God, which of course is also very, so to say, untypical for a Christian. A Christian would never discuss with God. Why should he or she, one has to obey or have another kind of communication, but you wouldn't debate with him. There in antiquity there were two big, one could say, schools of interpreting the Torah. Yeah? One was the school of Hillel and the other of Shammai. And the school of Hillel was, one could say, tried to make it easier, and the school of Shammai made it harder to follow the Torah. And one day when they were discussing it, the voice from heaven came, because it's usually after the last prophets, if God ever intervenes, he does it by a so-called bat call, which is, if you call it translated literally, a daughter of heaven, but it's a technical term for God's voice. And he says, stop the discussion. Both interpretations are the words of a living God, so to say, my words. Yeah, I uttered them on Mount Sinai, but the Torah follows the school of Hillel. Okay, so you see, you could say both interpretations are right, but out of practical reasons we follow this interpretation. Yeah, because you have to, of course, solve a problem which you have rather strong in a religious culture where the realm is not only an inner realm but is practically doing it. You have to decide, okay, and this is a decision, okay. So, but still we could interpret the Torah in different ways, not in the practical sense, but in theory, so to say.
Carolina and Katarina. So Katarina first.
I wanted to ask about that Katnut and Gadlut relationship, because if
I understood it right, and I'm not sure. Rabbi Nachman went to that journey as let's say normal rabbi, and after the journey became that charismatic person. And I wanted to ask if it was somehow reflected in the text which described his journey. What was the part of that Katnut, Gadlut, what was the impact of Katnut and Gadlut? What was the impact of the journey as such? Because it seems to me that this dichotomy can be experienced also without the travel, or is not like the inherent part.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I mean, one could say concerning his career, so to say, one could say he was a very gifted, one could also say a young man who might have a great future before the journey, and when he came back, he in a way had already fulfilled the promises. See, I mean, not in fact so, yeah, but because he then started his career as a tzaddik. But somehow he by doing this, he already has reached everything, which of course is a paradox. But see, he himself said, when I traveled to Eretz Israel, I fulfilled all 613 commandments. Okay, which is a joke. A lot of the commandments you cannot fulfill because they are connected to the service in the temple, which is destroyed. No one can fulfill all 613 commandments. Yeah? So even there's a paradox. Yeah? So, but to the second question, when you say, okay, this change of Gadlut, Katnut, he could also have performed at home in Podolia. He perhaps would say no. This is only possible to do in this necessary passage. Yeah? I mean, of course, it's a rite passage. Yeah? It has very much of it. See, the liminal phase when he's going to the Holy Land, then one could say the Holy Land becomes what is in this scheme the second phase, the wilderness. Yes, it somehow is the wild. I mean, it's not wild, but it's the contrast to the ordinary life in Podolia. Okay, so it's wild. It's the Holy Land. Holy is somehow holy is in if you take it as a strong category, the opposite of holy is profane. Okay, and profane means ordinary life, and holy means extraordinary life, and this can be high, or so to say, heaven or hell. Also, hell can be in a way saka in the Latin sense, because it's not the ordinary life, not everyday life. Yeah? And then the second, his return travel, of course, is the third phase, passing the reintegration. So. At home. Yeah, perhaps, yeah. See, I mean, what he claimed, what he has done is that he had this vision of the patriarchs, yeah, and which is quite funny in some sense. You could, of course, say, try hard and you can get this vision at home in Podolia. Yeah? No, he had to go to the Holy Land, but the trick is, there's also this Gadlut. It was not necessary to go to the gravesite of the patriarchs, not to Hebron. He had it far from Hebron, but in Eretz Israel. See, so I would say it wasn't possible for him to achieve this when he would have stayed at home all the time. Huh?
But I think we're really back to the old Tarnarian reflection about the liminality of the pilgrimage, because you are allowed to do what you cannot do in a normal life. And then there is also, of course, this question of what's happening really well. He was not walking so much, but still, this life of walking, privation, you are outside of your home, you are outside of your comfort, and it seems to be proved by really biological studies of the human body. Something is happening. You are more open to, let's say, paramystical experiences. That's something like objective. It's not a vision. If you are walking a lot, you are something else activating your brain, and therefore you can have easily vision. You can easily like touch point of your inner person, which you will never touch staying at home. And that's a part of the traveling. Since human being is traveling, because, well, what in psychoanalysis is called the inner children. So one of the layer which is inside you is quite difficult to be touched, and through the traveling in a certain way, you can do it. So that's I would not like to enter into discussion what mysticism is, because I'm absolutely uncultivated in this question. But something is happening with your body, and through this experience of the body, you can reach really other level of yourself, of your inner.
Yeah, but I would say it's also like psychoanalysis or only spiritual thing. It's purely physiological, because you're breaking like the neural adaptation. If you're getting all the time the same impulses, same, I don't know, if you're living your ordinary life and get used to things and you perceive like plus or the change if you travel or you change the place, only that act is enough to have that feeling that you. I'm sorry,
No, but I don't see any position. Of course.
No, I just wanted to say that it's not necessarily like a spiritual explanation for this. It's purely.
But I was not like in spiritual way. I was speaking about neurological reactions. But it's not. I mean, in a certain sense, it's not important at all why it is happening. If it's because which kind of hormone is coming from your feet into your brain, or because you have a good vision, objective one, miserable one, with the St. Francis vision of God. That's. I mean, let's leave it to the question of faith or not faith. That's for me like completely secondary stuff. What's the real question is that you are transformed. And if it's because of neuron or because of vision, I would say it's a secondary. I mean, it's important if you are like searching for the scientific reasons or not. But in your own experience as human body and being, I would definitely apply with this chill against what it was quoted several times, this Cartesian division. What should we say that's purely not only neural? It could be or not, but what's important is what's happening with you being, or with our being now, through the experience. And I'm not speaking only about us, but also about Rabbi Nachman. Thanks to the movement, thanks to the changing of lifestyle, you can experience something which is impossible to experience at home. And for many reasons, had like a paramystical experience which will change his life forever.
Can I just ask, because you mentioned those theory about those three phases, and in this sense, I didn't understand really the third one. You speak about the time when you come back to the society. Because what you are speaking about, it's from the individual point of view. The building is changed and he is going back. He sees the things around him maybe by different way. But I think it's also connected with the Catalan's question, what about from the point of view of the society? Because I think it's only individual. It's not how the society look at you if you are different. I think they will not mention that you are different and become that. You know it, but you know the society. And this is also the question Katarina asked. He made something extraordinary, he came back, and he became Rabbi or
Tzaddik?
Yeah. So I asked, how is it from the opposite side, from the point of view of the society?
Now see, I would say, things what we call religious culture, and I mean I deliberately say it religious culture, because I think religion in a broader sense hasn't so much only to do what one believes or what one does, but as a kind of ensemble. Religions are like the arsenals, the treasures of ours, and the fabrics of our symbolic understanding of the world. Yeah. So this, I would also say, Katharina, to you, that it's not only biology, so to say. Of course, it's biology and it's materia, but it's also the symbolic forms, to say it with Cassira. Yeah? We have no, of course, we have a scientific, so to say, understanding of what biology is, and we understand a lot, but I'm very skeptic that we could have a sufficient and even more satisfying explanation of culture if you only say it's biology, so to say. I mean, you didn't say it such, of course, but I think there's always another realm, so to say, and this is connected, Susanna, what you asked. There's also not only the individual division, what he in a way, Rabbi Nachman fulfilled, were also the expectations, see? I mean, he was a gifted young man. He had a pedigree. See, what a family. What the uncle did, he was quite successful, but he was one among many tzaddikim. He was a Wunderrebbe, but not the tzaddik of his generation, what Rabbi Nachman in a way aimed at, but who knows, I mean, I do not want to make too much psychological speculations, but it's also a kind of role fulfilling of a role. Think of this magic world I was speaking about. It's also not your individual decision, and I mean the young girls do not go to the mikveh because they want to know it. Yeah? And this is in a way important and in a collective way. See, and see usually this kind of initiation, because the three phases are the three phases of what we would call dritte Passage or initiation. Usually in so to say archaic or more traditional societies, there are fixed patterns for the four big passages every woman and every man, every human being has to pass. Birth, growing up, marriage, death. C'est ça. And of course, some of them are by accident. I mean, no one can say one is one born and one die. But the two others you can do collectively. I mean, a whole year is now declared to become adults. Yeah? Everyone who is 14-year-old or see the marriage here in by the way, it's also in the life of Nachman when he is married when he's 13. He has two things fall together: the marriage, and I forget to say this. In Judaism, when a young boy becomes 13, he's bar mitzvah. He becomes a grown-up in the religious sense, which means that when he attends the service in the synagogue, he can be part of the so-called minyan. The minyan are 10 people, and if you have male, and if you have 10 men praying, you have the minyan. You have, so to say, it's no more private. Okay, when 9 grown-ups are praying, it's a private affair. Yeah, but if you're 10, you are, so to say, a community. Yeah. And so here you see it falls together, yeah. And this you can of course make collectively. Huh?
But about your question, if I may, I'm sorry for by the public, but I would answer the Lord of the Rings, because Lord of the Rings, in the sense, it's like a pure example of the ternary and like Trinity. Frodo has to live to share because he has to accomplish something in the liminal zone between the rest of the world and Mordor, and then come back. And it's one of the reasons of why the Peter Jackson movie is like a pure catastrophe. Because being back, they are like into the movie, just like before, no one is understanding them, and they are like lost. So it would be like a partial answer, no acceptation by the community of the persons coming back. Although in the Tolkien's version, they are arriving back, and the Shire is in a big danger. Someone wants to destroy the previous order, and they are like fighting in order to be brave. And then you have two different attitudes. All four the Hobbits, so Merry, Pippin, Frodo, and Sam went to the, let's say, world. They lived this experience, and they went back from their travel pilgrimage. And two of them, Pippin and Merry, decided like to say to the entire society, we are different. They're using different clothes, and they become heroes of the space where they are living. On the Frodo, who was, by the way, the person who did the Christologic stuff, who really transformed the world through his own transformation, go to the shadow. And Sam is like disappointed. You have really Sam who is disappointed that no one is realizing that Frodo is the one who did, by the way, do very important thing. What I want to say by that if you are back from the pilgrimage, if you are back from the, let's say, liminality, and you reintegrate the society, you have several ways to reintegrate. You are back, that's the physical stuff, so you are back into the society. And you are for sure transformed if you are following Tanner and also Van Gelder, because you have to be transformed by any movement. And then you can declare, I was changed. See, I'm different. Now I can be the Rabbi of my generation, the very big Z. Or you can also don't declare it, and then the communitas around you, the new one, the old one, will just not remark. And this, by the way, we discuss a lot of with Favre, this notion about what is happening when you are back. Because if you are living an extraordinary experience, in general, and you are back to the, let's say, normal society, you sometimes, I don't know if someone of you felt it, in many different experiences, you are back, and then you have the impression that nothing happens. I'm just back, and I'm losing what I lived in this liminal zone. What should I do now? And I think that it's really a question of the dialogue, the compromise between you and your normal order, and which you have to negotiate. So it's sort of social negotiation after the return. But there is not a problem. In this sense, the strict medieval society, for example, Turner is quoting this fact that you are back and you enter into the fraternity of the Jacobins, so the person who went to Santiago. So in this sense it's clear, you have to attend it, but still, this pilgrimage could become the 12th century, the thing which will transform your life or not into the normal life. And that depends on the compromise and the discussion between you and the new world. So for sure you'll be back, for sure you'll be different, for sure people will know that you are back and that you are different, but then you can put it in shadow or not. So it's the question if you want to be Meriadoc or further.
Can I have one more question? I wanted to ask how much extraordinary the Jewish pilgrimage that he made was, because were there some other Jews in the time that were doing the pilgrimage, and how spread was the phenomenon?
Okay.
So if the extraordinary was in the way he did it, or if it was that he did it.
Okay. See, the extraordinary was in the way he did it, especially. It was common to pious Jews, especially when up in a certain age, so to say, when they have fulfilled their duties, that's too much, but it was not uncommon that when someone was old, went with his family to Jerusalem or Tiberias or Hebron or other of the holy sites. Yeah? It was not that it was expected of someone to do it, but it was not a sensation, so to say. It was nothing extraordinary. You could do it. Yeah? Usually what was in a way different, one could say, from the pilgrimages of Christian to the Holy Land is that if Jews did it in a way they decided to then stay there, okay? So it was not that the young or the people who perhaps felt guilty went there or did a vow, if I become healthy again, I will make a pilgrimage to Jerusalem. It was not typical. It was a kind of coming to terms with, so to say, entering also the last stage of active life, so to say. And this was good to do at the holy sites in Jerusalem, because then you are buried there. See? It was not that, I mean, for the Christians, I think, at least as I know, it was not the wish to be buried in the Holy Land, but for Jews it was, so to say, one of the goals. Okay, so there was a kind of, one could say, immigration. I mean, it's also the reason why, especially Rabbi Nachman was for long regarded as a kind of proto-Zionist, because he went to Eretz Jisrael and then everything was nice. But it's definitely not the case. I mean, there's a strong link in Jewish religious culture to the land, okay? But in a very complicated sense. So yes, it's the way how he did it. I mean, he himself put also the stress on it and said, if I hadn't, I mean, the problem, of course, is that it's this double entendre. It's the esoteric-exoteric. Yeah, he never said. I mean, he said I could only become tzaddik hador because I have traveled to Eretz Yisrael. This he said, but he didn't explain it. Why? So okay. So his own view, his own perspective on this travel was definitely the way he did it.
So not every tzaddik, for instance, had to go to the Holy Lands.
Right, yeah, that's true, yeah. I mean, perhaps he wouldn't have said this, but yeah, I would say so. It's not like the Hajj in Islam that you say once during your lifetime you have to visit Mecca. That's not the message.
Just like suggesting, Joseph Holt wrote a beautiful small book about the Jewish going to Israel at the beginning of the 20th century. So if you want to read it, it's fortunately translated in Czech and just like a small, tiny book. And in general, I can suggest that maybe Holt can be a nice access to some of the things Martin was speaking about, because he wrote a beautiful book about what is called Eastern Jews. A small book which is describing like the life of those persons living into the, let's say, Eastern Central Europe, and also the relationship with the Torah, with the scripture, and also this one about the traveling is like quite nice.
And what I would, I mean, you're right. What I also was thinking, what I could recommend to you. I mean, you have so many things to read, but perhaps sometimes you want to read a novel or a short story. Isaac Bashevis Singer, the Nobel laureate of the somewhere in the 80s, I think, he wrote a lot of novels and short stories, either situated in the past of Eastern Europe, okay, or in the diaspora, in the nowadays diaspora in New York, Brooklyn, huh? And some of them are really good. I mean, it's good literature, so, and it's interesting as he's very strongly producing what I have called Nachleben. See? It's not necessary that one believes in it. It's. I mean, what is so funny is that there is a Hasidic legend. The Besht, the Baal Schem, he used to go to a place and then he said the right names of God and then a miracle happened, okay? The next generation already forgot the names, but they knew the place where to go. They went to the place and the miracle happened. The third generation not only forgot the names, they also have forgotten the place, but they still remembered the story, so the miracles happened. This is a kind of Nachleben, see? That some of the, it's not in a strict sense you have to follow tradition. There's still something and this is what I would call the symbolic level of life somehow. It will happen even if you do not know where it happens and how you can make it. You have to be aware that it once happened, okay? We can, of course, say this is a very traditional and even a religious standpoint, but perhaps it's also an somehow at least symbolic standpoint, and one from which one could start further researches into these problems, of how tradition and how change within tradition is possible. I mean, I think that's one of the main problems we are dealing with. It's not only the individual who wants to get rid of something, see? Not only an individual who is guilty or feels responsible for something and he or she made a vow, or like in the case of Rabbi Nachman, you can't forget Rabbi Nachman. It's not no one we can learn from, but still the story tells us something, that even in a very traditional setting, new elements are possible, the production of new elements. And I think this is something also important of of what you did, at least in my understanding. I think no one of you will become, as one could say in Yiddish, frum. No one will now be a devout Catholic and will make pilgrimages, I suppose at least. But still, there is something in not only this experience, but in the symbolic form you produced, and I think you produced one, pilgrimage, which wouldn't say it will last, but which you are able to make productive for your work. So that's what I want to say. How, I do not know. But
because I think that we can continue to discuss without the big I or the word which is like watching us. It's not
no, thank you. I hope you were not annoyed because of